Yeah, that's your name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass, and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
when you're
the ghost,
275 pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
Yeah.
You know.
He's like,
he's up there slapping, pissing all over everything.
Is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's I know.
Why did you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize.
You know what pert near means.
If you know what pert near means and you live in America, you're a redneck too.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pert Near Outdoors. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Pert Near Outdoors Podcast. This is your host Billy, and we're on to episode 141 here. I just got done recording this week's show with Nate Kennedy and Todd Waldron, two of my favorites in the local New York conservation scene. And these guys are great, and now they both work for the Ruffed Grouse Society. So we're going to talk a little bit about ruffed grouse. We're going to talk a little bit about timber management, kind of from the 10,000-foot level, not going to get too much into the weeds. Kind of talk about what's going on here in New York State with the Young Forest Initiative and some of the plans that are out there currently for the state forest management plan that the state is kind of reviewing and looking at putting their next 10-year plan out. So we got a bunch of that going on. We talk, all sorts of topics along those lines, kind of go down a couple rabbit holes, which is always fun. I'm sure I talked more than I should have, but either way, it was a fun discussion with these guys, and appreciate them both and appreciate what they do on a day-to-day in their lives and in their professions. So we've got that coming at you here in just a moment. Shed Fest is marching right along. Sheds are dropping. I'm recording this, like I said, this is Tuesday night, the 15th. I found my first shed yesterday while I was out doing some timber work at the farm, and was about freezing my hands off, and I just stuck with it. And next thing you know, I'm sitting here at the table right now at my podcast table looking at this beautiful 4-point side off an 8-pointer, freaking gorgeous buck. I pretty excited to see what he turns into. I really don't think we have pictures of this deer, so I'm not sure where he came from. We probably have pictures at some point, but nonetheless, most of the bucks appear to be dropped around us. I know I'm seeing pictures. My brother's getting pictures of deer still holding. So there are a bunch of bucks still holding on to horns, but for the most part, it appears that most have dropped, at least here in Wyoming County anyway, and on our property on the farm. So get out and take advantage of it. I think it's going to be a prime weekend because we're going to have kind of a big warm-up here tomorrow and Thursday, and that snow is going to melt rapidly, and I really think it'll be, before that snow's completely gone, I think it'll be really ideal for finding sheds if you can get out there and see where those deer trails are, where they've been just living. That's what I did this afternoon. I ran out. I had literally 20 minutes. Had to go get the kids from daycare. So I said, screw it. I really want to go check out this one area and just see, because we haven't pressed in there at all. Trying to leave the deer alone. And man, I ran in there. I got into the pines and kind of just started walking real quick on the deer trails. Just anything that I was going to see was going to have to jump out blatantly obvious at me. And I did end up finding a little yearling buck side. So I was pretty excited to find that. And that's going to be my game plan here over the next 4 or 5 days. If I've got time to get out, I'm gonna try to get out and just try to cover some ground, walk those deer trails in the snow before that snow is completely gone. It'll be interesting to see how much of it actually melts, because we've got a solid couple feet of packed down, melted and frozen again snow here in our neck of the woods. So I'm interested to see how fast it goes. We will watch and see how it happens. But we got that. But yeah, Shedfest is rocking and rolling. If you haven't signed up yet, head over to pertneroutdoors.com, purchase your T-shirt. You can get in on the action. Once you buy the shirt, you're automatically entered for the raffle. We will draw the raffle on April 9th. We've got a whole list of prizes, went through it in last week's podcast, so I won't regurgitate all that right now. But all you got to do is buy your shirt, and you are entered into the raffle. And the shirt should be in soon. I keep saying that, but I really mean it. After last week's episode, I reached out to Russ Morgan and asked him what the status was, and he said that they were just waiting to be printed. So I'm anticipating any day now. That was only 3 or 4 days ago. So yeah, I think we're going to be seeing them pretty quick. So stay tuned there. We should have them available to ship out as soon as they come in. So get your shirt ordered. I did tonight. I was thinking about it, and I said, you know what? I know I've got several people that signed up or that I know will sign up that might want to buy a couple shirts, maybe one for themselves, one for their spouse, one for one of their kids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I did already, and I just need to make it live. I'll make a shirt and raffle only option, so that if you already have a membership, or if you've, let's say you want to, like I said, you want to buy one for yourself and then buy one for another person in your household or a friend or something, and you would like to just get the shirt and not have to, actually that doesn't sound right, but you don't need an additional membership to the Deer Association. That might be a good option. So I'm going to post those up for $19.99 for the shirt and the raffle alone without the membership. So go ahead and select that one. That'll be there, and we'll do the same. That'll run till April 1st, so you can buy in there. Bunch of good stuff happening. Things are good. I appreciate some of the feedback from last week's podcast. It was kind of just a spur of the moment deal. I kind of went on a couple little rants there, and got some good feedback from people. Some people that appreciated what I said. So it means a lot that people are out there listening and that they appreciate what I'm saying. So I was just in that mindset the other day, and I just let it fly. So I will always do that. I will always be me for you, the listener. And when I'm feeling it, I will let it fly. That's what I'll do. You have my Scout's honor there. So I think I will wrap it up at that. If there's anything else, I'm sure I'll just hit record again and record it before I put it out. But have a great weekend. Get out there and enjoy the sunshine on Saturday and Sunday. It looks like it's going to be beautiful. And go find some sheds. It is just the best time of year, in my opinion. You got no bugs. You got no leaves. You can see the woods, and you can see where the deer are hanging. And it's a great time to figure out how you're going to kill that deer come October, November. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Enjoy this discussion with Uncle Todd and Mr. Nate, and have a good one. Keep feeding them, people.
Billy, it's good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm wonderful, Uncle Todd. You even titled yourself the proper name. Look at that.
I've been looking forward to this all since you sent it out.
I know. What's up, gents?
It's good to catch up.
Yeah.
What's going on, man? I've even got my wife calling him Uncle Todd now.
Hey.
Isn't that awesome?
For people that don't know me, they probably think I have a lot of uncles and cousins and brothers and sisters, cousins.
Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how have you been, Billy? It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. It's good to see you as well. I've been great. Life is busy. We're just literally wrestling with Billy to get him to bed because this is day 2 of Valentine's Day parties at daycare, and the kids have just been mainlining sugar all day, and I think they're missing their naps. So yeah, they're literally fired up, and Kate's easy peasy. I'm sure by the time she gets to be 2.5, 3 years old, she'll be hell on wheels. But yeah, you've been there, Todd. You know how it goes.
Well, we just got over the main line from Halloween. I mean, we just got rid of all that candy, and now it's Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
So
just how the hell do you string out Halloween candy for that long? That's impressive.
There's mostly wrappers at this point,
Rations.
You think there's still candy there. You think you're doing your parental duties. You look in the bag that's hidden, and it's just a bunch of Reese's Pieces wrappers and stuff, and like it wasn't the mice.
No.
Oh man.
No. Nate, just you taking notes, Nate? You know, a couple old dads here, just wisdom, you know.
I'm learning. I'm soaking it all in, keeping it in the queue.
Yep. I didn't even
dad life.
hashtag dad life. Yep. Just put it in that memory bank.
That's right.
So we're broadcasting live on 3 different platforms right now. So we're on Bullhorn, which is where we're at, and then we're on Facebook, over on our Facebook page, as well as on YouTube. So we're trying to get out there in as many different ways that we can, and this is probably the smoothest start to a show we've ever had. With so I think we're figuring it out. Bullhorn's getting a little easier to use. So for everybody who's tuning in here live, appreciate you joining us. I'm joined by, obviously, if you're looking at the screen and listening to us, you see Uncle Todd, which is Todd Waldron. So Todd, welcome to the program.
Great to be here, Billy.
Yeah, and Mr. Nate Kennedy. So both of these guys have been guests on this show many times now, and friends of ours and local New Yorkers and guys that are on the ground, engaged and involved in conservation work here in New York. So that's going to kind of be the main focus of our discussion today. But I guess Todd, if you want to give a quick introduction of yourself, a little bit of your background before and then I'll do the same with Nate, just for anybody who hasn't met either one of you guys or know who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, thanks so much, Billy. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. And hey, folks, great to be here. My name's Todd Waldron. I live in the Adirondack region over near Lake George in New York. Lifelong Adirondacker. Love the outdoors. Work in forestry. Been doing forestry and habitat work for many, many years. And then just recently last year joined on with Ruffed Grouse Society to do conservation work for the nonprofit space here in the Northeast. So get the wonderful opportunity of working with the one and only Nate Kennedy. It's an amazing experience. And in my spare time, I love to hunt and fish. I love to podcast, mentor. So being able to come together tonight and just hang out it's a big, big treat.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, and you were, a fun fact for anyone who's new to our show and new to Todd. Todd's, he was the first one that got me into podcasting. Literally, I sat down up in the park in Saratoga, and we did a podcast outdoors back on his show, East to West Hunting Podcast. That was a OG episode way back, and that was fun. And then got to know Todd more and more, and you were a huge influence on us getting this podcast going. So appreciate you as always. And it's been too long. It's been like a year since, I think it was probably just about a year from now, back in 2021, that I had you on, and we talked about forestry and activities in the Adirondacks. That was a really interesting discussion. So if anybody's interested in that, definitely encourage you to go back and check that episode out. Nate, why don't you give yourself a little rundown here? I want to know how tall you are. Did you play middle linebacker or right tackle? That's what we want to know.
6'4", clocking in this morning at a cool 314. So I'm down a few pounds. No football for me. Not a sports guy. I think I said that on the last time I was on here. Yeah. Hate to break the hearts out there, but I'm Nate Kennedy. I live up in Potsdam, New York, up in St. Lawrence County. And I've been with the Ruffed Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society since July 1st. So we're getting in 7-8 months in now. It's been awesome. I'll echo what Todd said too. Being able to work with him has been quite a treat. We're doing a lot of cool things and looking forward to the future and continuing it. Before this, I was with Cornell Cooperative Extension as a 4-H educator, doing a lot of natural resource stuff and the 4-H shooting sports programs. And now I'm the regional engagement coordinator with the Ruffed Grouse Society. So I'm here in the Northeast working with chapters and members, doing fundraising and engagement and outreach.
Cool. And you also do some writing too, Nate. That's something that you do that I really enjoy. You do some kind of, I don't know if you call it like freelance or if it's just outdoor writing for different publications, but you've done some stuff for the Auburn paper and then Outdoor News. I think you've done a couple too, right?
Yeah, I write a monthly column for the Auburn Citizen, and even since I moved out of the Finger Lakes, I'm lucky that they still keep me around there. And yeah, I've written a couple things for Outdoor News, and been fortunate enough with the new gig to write a few pieces for the Covers magazine, RGS magazine, as well. So yeah, I do that as much as I can, but just a side project,
side hustle. Yeah,
that's right.
You're a wordsmith, that's for sure.
I try.
Yeah. So I guess with two of you guys, so Ruffed Grouse Society is something that is, I had heard about it, but I knew absolutely nothing about the organization. And to be honest with you, I still don't know a ton about the organization. So I kind of want to educate our listeners tonight on what you guys are all about and what the mission of the organization is and why it's important, why Ruffed Grouse are important and why what you guys are doing is needed in that organization. But I think the background of you two is very interesting to me with both your forestry and your educational backgrounds. So I guess kind of starting with you, Todd. And so did you guys both go to the same college, just obviously a few years apart? Is that correct? I shouldn't have said that, Todd. I said obviously a few years. I think I'm trying to age you here.
Nate went long before I did, Billy.
you paved the road for Nate Kennedy.
My background was such that I just always grew up loving being in the woods. My grandparents had a wood lot here in North Creek. I remember as a child going down there in the summertime. They used that wood lot. It was 46 acres to cut wood on for firewood to heat their home. So my dad and his 5 sisters lived in this little house with them in North Creek. And my grandfather and my grandmother would cut wood. So my grandmother had a chainsaw. We'd all go down. The kids would, limb and pile that stuff and put the wood in the truck. And, so I just grew up around wood and forests and being outdoors and hunting. And so when the opportunity came up, to go to school and to try to pick a career path, that just seemed like a logical transition for me. So went to SUNY ESF, College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, like Nate. Also went to the Ranger School up at Wanakina, which is their forest technology program. And ESF has a great program and a great history. One of the oldest forestry schools in the country. Bob Marshall went there. His parents were benefactors. Like, they were really big funders for the school. Marshall Hall is named after them. So all this cool history, and it was just a neat place to go. And you got all the perks of Syracuse University too, the football games, the basketball games, and all that stuff. So
yeah, for any young kids that are listening to this, high schoolers and that are interested in the outdoors and potentially forestry going into being NCON, things like that, like, it seems like that's a pretty good avenue to go. And like you said, ESF is right on the Syracuse campus, and you're essentially a Syracuse student, but you're focused through that branch. It's kind of like going to Cornell. Like, they've got the different schools at Cornell. Like, you're in the ag school, or you're in this or that. So yeah, pretty interesting. I wish, that was one of those things that you always wonder, like, what would it have been? It was something that was always interesting to me. And I don't know if I ever truly really sniffed around. I know I looked at Morrisville for stuff, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to do. I think my calling was always going to be to sell a school bus. It's kind of what my calling is. But then I wouldn't be as passionate about what I do in this, if I was living that all day, every day. But so Nate, kind of similar with you. You went through high school and went off to ESF. What was your game plan there when you went to school at ESF?
Yeah, so I actually I started at SUNY Potsdam, and I was involved in a Adirondack Environmental Studies freshman interest group, which is basically like kind of a cool version of like a 13th grade. You know what I mean? You take your first semester of college with everybody in the same class. And on Fridays, every Friday for that first semester, we did field trips into these super awesome parts of the Adirondacks. And I loved that. The rest of my time spent in Potsdam was learning how to be an 18-year-old. And so I transferred to Plattsburgh a couple years in, and really started to actually engage with the content up there. I did a natural systems environmental studies program at Plattsburgh, and I left there in 2016, and I got a summer opportunity to work in the national park system. And so I did 2 summers in the national park system all over the country, from Virginia to Alaska and just all over the place. And we were doing trail surveys and studying trail crowding, and we did some visitor use work where we would study visitors come to an area for a national park, but what else do they do while they're in that area? And a lot of great things like that. And along the way, I applied to the master's program at ESF. So I didn't get to Syracuse until grad school. And it was interesting. I really applied to grad school because I was finishing up undergrad and still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was in that space in the environmental programs where you're, studying resource conservation. Environmental studies is like you're looking at environmental issues a lot of times from a historical and a literary perspective. And I thought all that was great, but I didn't know at the time how to turn it into a job. And so that's basically why I went to grad school. I didn't have a field that I was particularly trying to get into. I'm a hunting and fishing junkie and always have been. But I never put that first in college, which I don't have a lot of regrets, but if I could go back, I probably would have tried to research something in the hunting field. But ended up at ESF studying like ecotourism and parks and protected areas and conservation of protected areas and natural resource law and policy and things like that, and continued that park work. Got my master's in 2018 and went to work for Cooperative Extension. And in that 4-H program, and Billy, we did a whole episode going on and on about how awesome 4-H was. And, and it was a blast to work there. And I love that whole system. But it's super diverse. So I did a lot of things with ag, which isn't my background, and with, health and nutrition, which isn't my background. And when we were doing conservation or hunting and wildlife or 4-H shooting sports, I was just right at home. And so I really knew then that I needed to make the kind of step into doing that full time. And that's kind of how I came to Ruffed Grouse Society.
What a journey.
Yeah. So Todd's ESF experience is like incredible and up in the Adirondacks. And for me, I was in a basement dungeon office in Marshall Hall, just reading and writing for 2 years.
Yeah, but what an experience to travel. I mean, I know we talked about it in the first episode that I had you on back in probably 2018 or 19. Well, it would have been 19. But, just the opportunity to travel the country when you're a young guy, you're not strapped down to anything, the ability, those are things that you only get one shot at. So, what a great opportunity to go do that and see and experience and be part of those different studies, looking at those things. So,
changed my life, man. Really did.
Yeah, no doubt. Take those opportunities when they're given to you. Cause at the time, I mean, we can all sit and look back at our past and say, man, like I think I took advantage of a lot of the opportunities that were in front of me, but who knows, you could easily take the path this way instead of that way, and it could totally change the direction of your life, and whether it's your career or your family, whether you meet that girl or not, like you don't have a clue what direction life could have gone, So, so that's kind of the background. I like laying the base, So let's talk about RGS and what you guys have going on. So I guess Todd, kind of starting first with you. So you were the first on the scene there. What would you say it was about a little over a year ago, right? You took that role there. So what's going on with RGS, and what's the organization? What are they up to? I guess what's going on in our space?
Yeah, it's been a great journey too over the past year. So prior to working with RGS, I'd been working in forestry for I think 25, 26 years throughout the Northeast, building partnerships, working with private landowners and conservation groups, and, did a lot of work on the consulting side and some forest industry side too. So I've just been around this my whole life. And like when the opportunity came up with RGS to dovetail that into meaningful conservation work, it's been great. And so really what we're doing is, our mission is to unite conservationists around forest stewardship and wildlife and connecting the dots. So whether you are into ruffed grouse or bird dogs or woodcock or not, if you're into the outdoors, if you make maple syrup, if you hike, hunt, you like deer, a lot of the work that we're doing is promoting healthy, resilient, balanced forests, landscapes. So, landscapes that will be good and diverse for wildlife, for ruffed grouse. for woodcock. Those are barometers, right? Those are like check engine lights. And so when they're healthy, that means we're doing something right on the ground. And so that's what I've been working on is partnerships and policy, supporting habitat work and forestry. And most importantly, our members love habitat and they love projects. And so they really get fired up about seeing projects getting done on the ground. If you're a conservation group, there's so many conservation groups out there that are doing good work. Our members are really passionate. They love birds. They love dogs. They love being outside. They get fired up about getting stuff done on the ground. So that's what I'm really trying to dial into, getting those projects lined up. And so we've got some exciting things across the Northeast that we can talk about throughout the show tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's it's always been a thing of my family. We've owned the property down in Naples, and I was never really an active participant in managing that property. Jimmy and I were free labor, so we were active participants in saying, hey, pick this piece of wood up and move it over here. But like the actual ability to go and physically make that cut on that tree and to try to improve that habitat yourself, and that's something that I've become immersed in over the last year on my in-laws' property. And it's like, I am like completely bit by that bug. Like once you get into that and then you're actually seeing like I made that improvement to this area and these deer are living there, or we're seeing rabbits all over the place now where I don't know is that we were seeing a ton of rabbits before because of the work that we're doing. And it's like, it's really addicting. So that is what I want to talk about because I'm interested in what sort of projects are going on. But as far as RGS, Ruffed Grouse Society, as far as their, like, what does your membership look like? Is it a lot of people that are like private landowners that are passionate about this? Is it people that don't own property that are interested? Like, I guess the whole Ruffed Grouse culture to me is very interesting because I'm not really up to it. Like our family, we would see grouse growing up. You hear them drumming. You see them during turkey season on the log in front of you, kind of strutting, doing their thing, in the spring. And it's like, it's a cool experience, but we never like actively went out and hunted for them. So what does it look like for people that are members of the organization? Are they like, what's the mix, I guess? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I would, if I may, I would say it's a great mix of, you mentioned private landowners. We have a lot of people that, that are trying to focus on stewardship of habitat in their backyard. I think when we talk to a lot of folks that grew up in kind of the heyday of grouse hunting, it used to be and still is in a lot of places such an accessible bird. Our friend Gary Stefani there works with BHA here locally. He has great stories of when he was a kid hunting grouse in his backyard in Massachusetts and those areas where he used to hunt are now gone, right? So we have there's a big piece of what once was and what can we do when it comes to our membership, when it comes to landowners and even people that don't own land. We have a great group of public land hunters and folks that hunt all over the country for grouse and woodcock and other things. But their biggest, Todd kind of said it, like these people get fired up about healthy habitats, right? Like they're really keyed in on healthy forests and trying to lend their hand towards what can we do to make that happen. So that's a really cool piece because it's habitat driven. I think it always has been and it always will be. And with that comes those other pieces like the R3, and things like that we're of course working on, but it's habitat focused and the mix of members is, we have a wide age range and we have a wide breadth across the country of where folks are from. Obviously in areas with great grouse hunting, we have great members, but we have pockets of people that, we've got chapters in states that no longer have a grouse season, and we've got regions of the country that grouse aren't doing too well, and we still have members that are very engaged in those areas and fighting the good fight and raising money for habitat work.
Yeah. So you bring up something, Gary talking about how good the grouse hunting used to be in his backyard or whatever that situation, but it's not anymore. It's gone. What do you mean it's gone? I guess I want to dig into that because I think that's the direction I want to take this discussion. Is it the habitat's gone? Is it that the property got sold or what? I don't know if you know that exact situation, but do you know?
I think for Gary specifically, to pick on Gary as an example, I think it's now like development.
Yeah.
In that area, habitat loss, total loss.
Mm-hmm.
But for some areas, like I know Todd can speak to this. We deal with a lot of areas that just for whatever reason, there's a lot of things involved. They just have single age forests. You know what I mean? There's just areas with less diversity, which is, we go on and on for, healthy habitats. So there's just a lot of areas that are beautiful and even a lot that are protected and celebrated and used for a variety of reasons. But when it comes to upland birds, grouse and woodcock specifically, there's just areas that need young forests and diverse forests and things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping that you would say, because I think that's, so as you talk, Todd, like getting involved in these projects and engaging and trying to work on, improving the landscape or the habitat, so you have better habitat. That's something that I am like uber focused on whenever I'm driving down the road, I'm looking in the woods, and it's like, man, that is wide open. There needs to be some timber cut out of there. We need to hinge cut some of that stuff to thicken it up so the deer have some cover or the browse. And it is like, obviously I'm deer focused, but what's good for deer is good for grouse in the most part. And I think that's one thing that is, I want to dig into that is, managing the forest in a way is very important. And I think that's something we talked about the last time, you and I, Todd, like just looking at the Adirondacks in particular, you have that kind of mosaic as you explain it, where you have the private landowners and you have the state land, the public land, where some of that stuff's forever wild, but then you have the private land that is needing to be managed and maintained, and timber needs to be harvested so you can keep those habitats working. But, aside from the Adirondack situation, what are you seeing on the landscape that has, and I made this note about history, but I think there was a lot that was done wrong in the past, timber management wise, and then it's put us in this situation where now we have, 50, 80 years later, we have these massive mature stands of timber all across the state that it's like they're not productive. Like nothing can really live there because it's just huge canopy and there's nothing growing underneath. So I don't know. I just said a lot, but I don't know where we want to go with that point there. I should be more direct to my actual question. But like, as you look at the region as a whole, the Northeast and New York as in general, like, what do you see as some of the challenges? Is there a lot of landscape that is not being productive because of that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I think you articulated it really well, Billy, in a lot of ways. And so let's start with what's going on with bird populations as a barometer to like how healthy forests are doing. That's one way of looking at forests, is like, how's the biodiversity doing? And the fact is like with grouse and woodcock populations, with other species like golden wing warblers, those populations are declining. They're in trouble. And so, like, for instance, over the last 20 years or so, Eastern Grouse Working Report was done last year by some agencies, Fish and Wildlife agencies, looked at data over the last 20 years. Grouse populations across the East have declined by as much as 50% actually over the last 20 years. So populations are trending down. That's telling us something's out of whack with the forest conditions. So, we're seeing that with grouse, we're seeing it with woodcock, we're seeing it with golden wing warblers, with New England cottontail. New York has a state forest action plan. There's like 537 species that are species of greatest conservation need. And a lot of what's driving that, beyond the development that Nate was talking about in Gary's situation, is that we're just out of balance. Like, we're in a departure from landscape diversity. So like you had alluded to the fact that like we have all these mature stands. And so this is like it's a really good news kind of thing that we have forests today, that we have the forests out there that are growing, that are doing all the things that forests do. That's a good starting point to have this conversation and to work on these needs. But like what's happening is it's a sea of sameness. And is like, like with looking at those mature stands, they're not as productive because they don't have the diversity in the structure of the trees and the ages and the heights and what all that means in terms of getting sunshine coming down on the ground to produce feed. So if you just have this over mature landscape, that's growing, you have a good situation from some forest benefits in terms of like clean air, clean water, carbon, but you're causing trouble for wildlife. And so what we're dealing with is just trying to bring some of that back into balance. And when we say that, like, we're talking a lot in just having patchworks of different ages for forests. And so having forests that are really young, that we call early successional, that have just restored and regenerated. And those are really fast growing species. They're sunlight tolerant. They're intolerant, rather. They're really good. They're like aspens and birches. They're going to be good for birds. They're going to be good for deer. They're going to be good for all the bedding areas. Having, the whole array of middle-aged trees, and having some really old trees too, just like people.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want everybody to be 60 years old. That's not going to be good for the population.
No, everybody be retired.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
Yep.
So, that's what we're dealing with. And so what we're trying to do is bring science-based solutions and forestry, and like connecting the dots so that we're doing good things on the ground, so that we're, doing what's right for water, doing what's right for trout, doing what's right for, what sustainable forestry looks like, and having those pieces in place and on the landscape. Because the fact is, even though each acre can't have everything, if you have a little bit of diversity across landscapes, like, you can have a lot of diversity for wildlife. It can't all be on one spot, but you can have all this stuff if you look at a landscape level and create the diverse conditions that can support that. So that's what we're doing, and it's really a lot bigger than just grouse. It's good for grouse. That's what we're fired up about, but we see that as kind of our yardstick in terms of how we're doing.
Yeah. And that's what drew me to want to join your organization. Obviously, I want to support both of you guys, but, I do see what you're doing seems to be it seems very unique organizationally, that you guys are so focused on what you are on the forestry side of it, where a lot of the other conservation organizations are more, whether it's they're focused towards, a specific animal, and what's good for that animal, and all the way up and down, whether it's in the political side or if it's in the advocacy side or R3, like, they're very focused around that animal, which those organizations are important. But I think what you guys are doing is very, very, very interesting. And the forestry piece of it's fascinating to me. And you said two things there. Well, it was one statement, but two different things that you typically don't hear them said together. And that's science-based solutions in forestry. And I think in today's modern culture, I think the word science has been ruined. Just that's a side note. I think science has been ruined. Science is not ruined, but the word science has been kind of tarnished a little bit. But anyway, forestry is typically not something that a lot of people would put in the same room as science. So explain that. Like, what is scientific about forestry?
Well, what it's doing is what forestry really is doing is studying how forests develop over periods of time. Forest, there's a couple of different things. If you just had a forest that started in nature and it grew, it has dynamics, right? There's reasons why certain species grow together and certain species don't grow together. There's reasons of how there's always changing as it grows. There's things called succession in terms of like how forests develop over time. And that's based on species composition and all this scientific stuff. And how forests are developed with sunlight getting on the ground and disturbance. So what we're trying to do, like, in its essence, is we're just trying to study how forests work and then emulate natural processes in a way that can foster that forest and create sustainability with it to keep it going, to provide all the benefits it does, but also to work with society's needs too, and people, and to be able to provide sustainable wood products for the homes that we live in. Most of us live in wooden homes or have some wood in them. We use a lot of forest products every day. And so those are circular, that's better than using steel and concrete and everything else. And so, that's a situation where, that's what really forestry is about, is trying to work with forest systems and ecosystems in a way that keeps them healthy, that keeps birds on the ground, that keeps deer on the ground, that keeps our options open and provides all those benefits that we were talking about. So yeah, and we use scientific words like dendrology and silviculture and mensuration, but really all we're doing is we're getting out there, we're measuring trees, we're using science for how trees grow, like how they relate to sunshine, what it takes to get forests to be young. We're just working with all that stuff, working with a lot of partners who are biologists and hydrologists and like science with water and different conservation biologists, and trying to make good decisions for forests that are also research based, that we can look at and say, yeah, this is predictable based on the data that we've collected over the last 100 years on how forests, how they operate.
Yeah, because I think with history, we need to learn from history, and I think that's what I did not know the history of the Adirondacks, and you had kind of really laid that out, Todd. And Nate, you're from the region, and so you guys are kind of grew up around it and passionate about it. But I mean, we completely abused the resource of our forests in the early 19th century, right? Or the early 20th century would have been the early 1900s. I mean, just clear cut everything, and it was a real problem. And you go around, and one of the things that really blows my mind, I don't know if blows my mind's the right word. I just got distracted for a second. I saw a squirrel. Well, I thought I was hearing something. I don't know where that was coming from, but I got voices in my head over here. What was I gonna say? Well, the Conservation Corps, wasn't that what it was? Like back in was that the 1930s, or was that after World War I or World War II that they had put a lot of people to work to replant stands of forest and stuff where there was nothing, right? It was that.
Yeah, like in the 1930s, that was part of social, that was not only, putting people to work, it was like getting things done with the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. That was a Franklin Roosevelt deal. It was really pretty brilliantly designed as well, got people working, got the economy cranked back up, and it did a lot of good for forests and nature and everything else.
Yeah, it got people engaged with the process, right? Even if you didn't own property, you were out there doing that. And that's one of the things I find, if there's ever opportunity to go out and work with, whether it's the state or, the state in particular, I know we did the one field day last summer out here down in Alfred in their state forest, some of the stuff down there. And it was like fascinating to see what the work they're doing, because you don't know about it. And you go down there and, walking around with Tristan Fugel, the forester, he's telling us the history of this, and all of those, there was this huge stands of white pine down there, and that was all planted by the CCC back in those days. And it's like, now they're cutting it. They're not clear cutting all of it. They're doing it in sections so that they have that successional growth. But it's once you start to understand so now when you drive down the road, you're looking and going, wow, look at that perfectly square set of pines up there. It's like, I wonder what the history is of that, and who planted that, why they planted that, and what was there. But I see like old pictures of like paintings and pictures of like around the Finger Lakes, like all the way around Honeyway Lake. That was just like on the west side of the lake was just completely wide, like no trees, no nothing. It was all wide open. Whether that's what it was, I would assume they cut it and cut all that down and made it into fields to farm. And it's like, you look at it now and it just seems like that's the way it should be, but it's not. Like, that's the way that it grew into once things regenerated itself. So the history is something to watch and understand, but once you get into what you were talking about, Todd, it's a never ending, just because we replanted it 70, 80 years ago doesn't mean that we don't need to touch it again. You need to actively be involved in that process, and that's why I think we've seen the changes in habitat and the changes in, some of these bird populations and different species that are on the decline, is because some of that work stopped, or, in the land ownership changed, and, culture changed. But I think some of that stuff is starting to pick speed back up, and it's organizations like yourselves that are involved in that and trying to encourage the importance of doing these things on your back 40 or on your family 100-acre plot, or even, now seeing what the state's doing. And I guess that's kind of what I want to transition into is, what some of the bigger projects are that are going on just around our state, and then what some of the proposed stuff is. So I guess first kind of talking, Young Forest Initiative, that's been going on for several years now. either one of you guys want to speak to, some of what is happening around New York and some of the wildlife management areas with that?
Well, I'll give an update on Young Forest Initiative quickly. So, that's an initiative on the state wildlife management areas. So there's different kinds of state land, and, there's state forests, there's wildlife management areas. And so the Young Forest Initiative is geared toward the 230 or so thousand acres that's in the wildlife management area bureau and division. And so part of that goal was to foster landscape diversity and forest age diversity, focusing on what's called early successional habitat. We're talking thickets. That's what we're talking about. Okay. And so the goal when that initiated was to create about 12,000 acres of young forest habitat across the 200,000 acres landscape or network of WMAs. And so states getting there, so each WMA has a forester. Most of them have a biologist. They work through the unit management plans. And what's happened so far is they've gotten some work done. They've created some habitat, but there's a lot of planning that's had to go forth on the front end of all this. So it's like a 10-year plan, but the first few years you're out there doing inventories, taking track of like how many trees do we have and how big they are and how much they're worth and what do we like. That's part of the science I was talking about in terms of like how we go about stuff. We don't just go out there and just make decisions about which trees get cut without really thinking through with what's there first. That's the first step. Having a management plan. So all that work had to be done. And fortunately, a lot of that work is getting done. And people can check out, if you're a hunter out here listening, you're like, hey, I want to know what's going on my WMA. You can go to DEC's website. Most WMAs have what's called a unit management plan. And it'll show you, there'll be a contact for a forester or a wildlife technician. There'll be a plan. And there's a point of like, if you're thinking, how can I get involved with my local WMA? That's a door for you to open up if you're interested in that level of participation. So yeah, we're getting there with the Young Forest Initiative. There's habitat that's being created across the system, and they're a few years behind. That's working through some staffing issues and resource constraints, but they're getting there. And I think overall as a partner, our view of this with DEC is to say, hey, we're here for you. We want to get this done. So if you see gaps, if you see where you're falling behind or you have resource constraints, that's how we can fit in as a partner, is to be a supportive piece of that. Do we need to bring funding to hire somebody? Do we need to leverage Pittman-Robertson funds? All that kind of stuff is how we approach it.
Yeah. And Nate, I think was it last spring, you did some of that tree planting down at one of the WMAs, and was that 8N, I think?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Brett and I put together a BHA project, mostly Brett. I just kind of went to turkey hunt and plant a few trees, but at High Tor, and that was in May. And the biggest takeaway for me with that was the forester and the biologist for DEC were there, and we spent a day. They were doing some invasive species work. Brett and I planted like 400 and something trees, I think, a lot of dogwood species and things like that. And the forester and the biologist had us kind of setting it up for grouse and woodcock, right? Like that's kind of what they were gearing it towards. It was part of the Young Forest Initiative. And, my biggest takeaway from that was they were so fired up to have us there. Just the two of us. I mean, it was just Brett and I.
Yeah.
A couple other volunteers, but from the BHA crew, we turkey hunted this morning, and now we're here. They were so just like loud and proud to have hunters on the scene and being an active part of that management. And that for me at the time, I mean, I was just it was very refreshing. You know what I mean? And it was, Brett and I turkey hunted that morning in an area of the state that there's a lot of folks that say like, no grouse around here. And we heard a lot of drumming.
Yeah.
I know you spend some time down in that neck of the woods, and it's beautiful. And some of the work they're doing on the WMAs with Young Forest is it's just great to see, as somebody that I can appreciate both sides of it. I mean, I've, been in some gorgeous old growth forests that I'm happy they exist. And I'm proud that we have them here in the state. And then you go into some of that active management areas and it's just, I love it. I love it all, but that Young Forest Initiative is just, I mean, it's WMA focused, but it's it's really cool.
Yeah. And that's what I'm finding, like, going and engaging just in that one day that I went down to that piece of state, that was state forest down in Allegheny. So that's not part of Young Forest. So this is all like educational for me. Like, I show up, I have no clue where the hell we're going. Let's just meet at this, this state forest headquarters facility, which is just a cabin where these guys work out of every day essentially, and end up meeting Tristan. Small world. Tristan literally grew up in my wife, her cousin's house that he lives in now. He grew up there. He's good friends with my buddy Nick that lives down the road from me, went to high school with him. So like automatically all of a sudden, like Tristan and I are buddies. We're talking, I got to get him on here. It's just been coordinating. Yeah. But you go and I learn all this stuff from hanging out with him for 2 hours, what they're working on, why they're doing it. They're actively managing timber in Allegheny County, and they have been for years, but like you don't even know about it. And you go down there and all the stuff that we drive 2 hours to go to Pennsylvania to do, it's not at the same scale of the Susquehannock State Forest, but they're doing it in these little chunks, and you can go have your one-day adventure by yourself, and you can go check those boxes pretty quick. So I went down there. So this was like late May, I think, maybe early June, and I go back down there. I think it was, what was it, the Monday? It was the Monday of muzzleloader season, so it was like the 17th or 18th of December. I go down there, and it was a cluster of a day. I had the day off of work, but there was stuff cracking. So I was like on the phone, bad cell service, and I had to like drive back up the road to get up the hill. I'm on dirt roads down in Allegheny County. And here comes this truck, and there's like a dusting of fresh snow on the road, but nobody's been driving around, and I haven't seen any trucks anywhere. It's like 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock, and here comes this truck, like, these hills are these big, long, straight roads, and I see this truck coming, and I'm like, I wonder who the hell this is, and they pull up next to me and roll the windows down, like, hey, can I see your license, and where's your weapon? And I'm like, shit. I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing everything right or not. And it's Tristan and the other forester that was with him the day of the project, and we shot the shit for a few minutes, and they're like, hey, where are you planning on going? I was like, well, I think I might go to the area we were working in over the summer. But hey, they're like, hey, we were just cutting like a week ago up the road. He's like, if you want to go check that out, I'm sure the deer are just bedding like right off of the cut and just feeding on the tops. So my point to this is, it's like, you go and participate in these things and you engage with these folks. They want you to enjoy that property just as much as they do, and they work on it. They live on the land there. So talk about an opportunity to get an inside scoop of what's going on, what they're seeing, what the hunting pressure's been. And I didn't take their advice. I went where my gut was telling me. I ended up shooting a deer after an hour and a half in. I shot a deer. It was a button buck, but it was a trophy shot. I didn't know what it was. Yeah. So
meat in the freezer, buddy.
Yeah, meat in the freezer is right. I donated that one, actually. That was my first deer I ever donated to the Venison Donation Coalition, so that was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
But talk about, you have these areas around that they're doing this stuff, and my God, was that such a fun day to just go venture around and see the stuff. And then Jimmy and I went to High Tor the following day, and I didn't know that was an area where they were doing some of this young forest, and I was like, holy shit, like this is gonna be like, you gotta work to get back into some of those areas where they're cutting, because you have to walk. I mean, you're talking a couple miles to get into some of these spots. But I mean, you're talking like big oak stands. Like this year there was no acorns because of the gypsy moths. But I mean, in the next couple of years, when that starts producing acorns again, and there's undergrowth and there's thickets, like holy shit, like that's gonna be some good hunting for whatever you're after. I mean, it's gonna be awesome. So yeah, that's cool to hear kind of the back end on some of the statistics of that, Todd, of the young forest. But now that, kind of going into the other piece is that the state just put out a new forest management plan that it's out for public comment right now, right? So, I mean, I kind of started looking into it, and it's a massive, like, what's that, like 200 something pages long, and pictures and charts, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like a lot to yeah. I downloaded them all. I've had intentions to look at it, but have you had a chance to kind of peruse over that and see what they're trying to achieve with that management plan?
Yeah. So what it is like, so the state put out, it's called the strategic plan for like state forest management, right? And so really what it is like the roadmap for the state lands that are outside the forest preserve. So if you're out there listening, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but we have about 800,000 acres of state forests and unique areas and multiple use areas and like natural heritage preserves and stuff like that, that are outside the park of the Adirondacks or the Catskills and that are actively managed through forest management plans. So that's separate from the wildlife management areas. That's separate from the conservation easement areas or the state parks. So what this is an opportunity to weigh in on how the state forests that are managed through forest management, like just to chime in as a hunter, as an angler, as a citizen, to be able to weigh in on what's important to you. And so, 800,000 acres out there, this kind of serves as the direction, the roadmap of the big picture. And then each like state forest, just like the wildlife management areas have their own management plans. Each state forest does too, mostly. They're called UMPs or unit management plans. And so what this is this is kind of like the overarching document that says this is kind of like how we're approaching forestry. We want to have diverse landscapes. We want to have biodiversity. We want to promote hunting and fishing and outdoor recreation. We want to work on access. We want to work on, sustainable forest products and how all that stuff works. So all that's in the process. So if you're a hunter out there and you're thinking about like, what can I do? How can I weigh in on it? You can write a letter if like you care about habitat, you can say that like, hey, this is what, I use this particular state forest and this is what I'm seeing. Here's my experience. And I like this, or I'd prefer to see something else here. That's the opportunity to do that, is to weigh in on all that stuff. So yeah, it's a huge document. It's like hundreds of pages. But like, there's parts of it that I'm encouraged by. It's good to see the state moving toward this recognition that we need landscape diversity and a range of forest conditions. We need some really old forests in certain places. We need some young forests. We need a lot of stuff in between. And we need to be like aware of all the benefits that forests provide, all the stuff that we enjoy from a hunting and angling community, but all the rest of the stuff that they provide too. And I think the good news is that if you're approaching it correctly, that you can provide a lot of those benefits, that it doesn't have to be an either or. We can have all those benefits with forests if we're approaching it in a way that's sustainable and in the big picture.
Yeah. And so is this a new process for the state, or is this something that they've done for decades? Like I feel like this is the first time I've seen it, but maybe I'm just because I'm paying attention.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I should have said that. So a little bit of background.
Yeah, what are you doing, Todd? You're just
so
misinformation over here. Give us the whole picture.
So this started. They put the first strategic plan for state forest management together in 2011. Joe Marquez was the DEC commissioner at that time, and so he had DEC. They'd had management plans prior to that, but my understanding is that there wasn't like a guiding document that was kind of like, here's as an agency how we want to approach state forest management on kind of like the 30,000 foot level. And so that's what the intent was to get people together, to have a strategy, to kind of pull some people together, create some common visions for the forest. It also serves as like what's called, this is kind of technical, but like the state environmental quality review in terms of like public commenting and NEPA and like environmental review kind of stuff. A lot of it serves as kind of like a generic environmental review for the state in terms of like how they generally manage forests. So it helps them kind of like through the public process as well. That's a little bit technical, but there's a purpose to that. And the good news is that helps streamline the forest management and the habitat work that's being done there over when it gets done. So this is a 10-year update. So yeah, they basically went in. Some of the changes that they did, they added more emphasis around indigenous lands and indigenous knowledge and like the history of landscapes with indigenous folks, which was cool. They updated a lot of the science and graphs and data around like where are our forests, like in terms of age and species mix and stuff like that. And has that changed over the last 10 years? And how do we need to make tweaks and adjustments? So that's really what they're doing, is they're just taking the temperature of the big picture and saying, hey, do we need to make any changes here to the direction, so that then we can get the individual state forests that we all love, so we can manage those through their plans and like have some continuity around that. Think about what's happening over on neighboring private lands around it.
Yeah. Nate, anything for you to add on that?
Just that the public comment period is open. I think it's open until like March 4th, maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they do, people gripe about DEC and that happens in every state, but they do take that into consideration, and they're looking for input from stakeholders. And if you're a hunter, an angler, a bird watcher, whatever in New York, you're a stakeholder, and you have every right to send that email or write that letter, and they make it fairly easy to do. And, I think we talked a little bit last time I was on, Billy, but I spent a little bit of time working with the New York State Conservation Council on just helping them with some media stuff a couple of years ago. But one of the things that I learned through that process is that the DEC's ear is open a lot, and it's important to participate in that stuff.
Yeah, and I think inherently, like, one of the things we all know, the three of us know this, is that most people, we might be interested in it or bothered by it, but it takes a lot of effort to interject yourself in the discussion. You have to actually go through the exercise of writing that email or writing that letter, picking up the phone and calling. And I've really tried to become more active in that, because typically either it's not the people that really are passionate about it on our side of it that are getting involved. A lot of times it's people that are against doing some of these things that are the ones that are shouting and yelling that they don't want hunting on these pieces, or they don't want timber cut. And it's, our voice is not shared. So everybody's opinions are important here. And I think, now more than ever, they are listening, and that's good. We saw that with the deer management plan, and there was a lot of good input there, and they made a lot of the changes based off of what people wrote in about, what the different organizations like the National Deer Association, their input. So it's important to belong to these organizations, because one, that gives you a voice as an organization, as a collective, but then also take the opportunity as yourself to, just simply go to, and I'll put it in the description here, I'll put the link to the plan as well as the link to the what the comment for the email is, but just shoot an email. It's painless. Even if it takes you 15 minutes to write up, put your thoughts together, it's you put your opinion out there, you voiced it, and that's a beautiful thing, and then you're involved in the process, and you never know, you might get an email back, or somebody might ask to speak with you, and it could make you more of that process all along,
At the very least, it buys you permission from me to complain.
Yeah, because if you don't, I mean? Exactly. If you're not part of the process, then you have no right to say anything about it. Amen to that, Nate. Yep. Oh man, I get these brain farts. I'm gonna put the links in there. We were talking about that. Do you see any? Well, I guess at first, so that deer management plan, I feel like this was the 10-year update. The forest plan, so they must have done the state must have done some of these things right around the same time frame. So it must have been leadership at the time in the DEC that was saying we need to put some of these plans together, because that makes great sense, because you have people that change, you have times that change, so you need to kind of adjust and put a long-term plan in place, work it, and then come back and look at it to revamp it. So it's cool to see that they're doing that. It's refreshing in the fact to see it. But from your experience, Todd, have you seen, like, you've done a lot of work in Pennsylvania and some of the other states up in the Northeast. Are other states doing similar? Like Pennsylvania, we know they have a huge timber, and I'm sure, I know, like, getting up into New England, they have a huge timber scene too. But is that something that, like, Pennsylvania has? Do they have a plan similar to that, where they have like a long-term plan for their state forest? It certainly seems like it.
Pennsylvania is doing some amazing work, Billy. So both on their state forest, I think they have a couple million acres of state forest. I've not been in Pennsylvania now for many years, so I'm a little rusty on it. But I can tell you that the Game Commission has been really, really doing amazing work in terms of habitat. And they've been working with partners. RGS has been working with them a lot, American Bird Conservancy, like really good, sustainable, landscape level, large impact kind of projects. They've got a tremendous prescribed burning program down there. I think they're burning 20 or 30,000 acres a year just on Game Commission lands. And that's in a way that's like really helping the habitat. It's helping, keeping the forests open, like the open savanna kind of stuff. It's doing amazing work for the habitat's quality of things. And it's also like really helpful for the species that thrive on that, because like your oaks, like when you're down hunting in Pennsylvania, you see all these amazing red oaks and bur oaks and chestnut oaks. To keep them on the landscape, we need some disturbance and fire and some forestry work. And so that's what they're doing. And yeah, a lot of the states are, doing great work. I mean, we have partners. We've got some great projects going on in Massachusetts right now, Mass Wildlife, Mass DCR. They're really fired up about trying to do sustainable forestry and to get habitat work done, and they want to. And they, same with Vermont, and then throughout the whole Northeast. And, one thing I've really learned coming into RGS is like there are a lot of good people in these agencies that want to do good work. And it is not always easy working through the process, working through all the public scrutiny for the people that don't want habitat work to be done or trees to be cut. It's given me a huge appreciation for the people that are trying to lead these agencies and get that work done. They could use our help. It benefits them. They appreciate, I can tell you from showing up at timber tours or wildlife habitat projects where they invite the public, having somebody like a hunter or an angler show up to one of those and say, hey, this is great, is amazing. They appreciate that. They're trying to do the right things. They've got a lot of obstacles. They got a lot of politics. So, it's given me a much better appreciation for that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities as a conservation group and as hunters and anglers to support that.
Yeah. And I think when I was having my brain fart a few minutes ago, I think where I wanted to go with that is I think what drives me, shouldn't say drives me. One of the things that is, and you just kind of touched on a little bit there, Todd, is like going and walking timber with people and educating people on what you're seeing and what's going on there. If you take someone, like take for my wife, for example, if I go out and walk the woods with her, she's not going to see, all she's going to see is how beautiful that piece of woods is. If she's got to walk through briars and there's young beech whips and stuff and it's, thick and she's like, oh, this sucks, I don't want to walk here, like, yeah, that's not enjoyable, but the value of that, like what that is for habitat, but yet you go and walk through, we've all been in those blocks of woods where you can look for 150 yards and it's wide open and it's all just beautiful, tall oak trees. Yes, that's a picturesque forest, but it's not healthy. And now more than ever, like we've had a pretty rough 6-8 weeks of winter here all across New York State. It's been freezing cold. There's been heavy snowpack. And my God, is this hard on wildlife because they are struggling to find food and they're not moving far. If they've got food, they're just sitting right by it. But like never is it more telling. Like once you start, you're starting to feel the rhythm of the property you're on when you can go and make a few cuts and like what I just did, there's going to be deer on that within 24 hours. And like I cut some trees in my yard the other day because I've got like 12 apple trees that are they're gigantic. They're like 45, 50 feet tall. They're trees. They're not like good productive apple trees. So I've been wanting to cut a few of them. I cut those apple trees on Saturday afternoon. Sunday morning, we had 8 deer in our backyard, and there's deer around. I mean, we're out in ag land, but we never have 8 deer in our backyard. There was deer in there that there was a couple of shed bucks. I could see their, the pedicles on them. I'm like, and I say to my wife, I told you, as soon as I cut those trees, there was going to be deer in here feeding. But that's one of the things that like, I just continue to drive home. Like we got to get involved as outdoorsmen and women and fishermen and women, anybody that is passionate about this and understands when you go out there and what you see is that we need to continue to share our message and engage in those opportunities you have to go out there and say, look at this, like, here's what we're seeing. And even if like, I don't know a lot, but I'm learning every day, and I'm learning by doing, and I'm learning by being engaged. And that's one of my biggest concerns, is not being engaged, because people that have the time or that want to go and engage, they may not have that experience, and they're the ones making the decisions for us. And I'll use an example, because it's, the state is doing a lot of these things and partnering with individuals and nonprofit organizations to help steer the future of the state, which I think it's great that they're having their constituents work with these processes. But I'm very involved in my day-to-day work job, looking at what's going on with like the New York State Climate Act and what they're doing with, trying to go net zero emissions and greenhouse carbon, all that. And I start going and digging down and looking at who's actually in these committees, and they're people from organizations in those fields and nonprofit organizations. And I'm not saying that any of them, I don't know what their backgrounds are, but they're people just like us that work for RGS, but they work for whatever organization out located in the Adirondacks. They're there. And like, so who's the people they're talking to? Where's their information coming from? What's their motives? What's their angle? And it's people. We're all people. And I think you got to step up and get involved where you can. And I've continued to say it, and I've continued to try to do it. It's hard because I can say all these things, but it's here we are, like scrounging to find the hour to have these conversations because we're all busy in our lives. But if it's you having that conversation, it's you sending that email, it's you engaging with a certain group of people, there might be somebody in that group that can go, and they have the time or they have the ability, or maybe you do, to go do that. So I don't know if you guys have anything to say to that, but it's just such a important time. I'm feeling it. Like, I think this is such a pivotal time in our lives to be involved and be engaged and be level-headed, speak what your thoughts are, and be part of the future.
I think when you're talking about, just going and seeing it, right? And sometimes it takes that. Sometimes it's needed to really just to see things happening in order to really get a grasp on what they're doing for you, or what they're doing for wildlife, or whatever they're doing for whatever your goal is. One of the things, Todd and I, we did a woods walk in September, right? Late September, right around the grouse opener up here in the northern zone. And we've got a gentleman who's on our national board, and he owns some property up in Ellenberg Center, way up north, a few miles from the border. And he's just got this property, and for years now, he's been just a absolute man, just a force to be reckoned with when it comes to managing this property for grouse and woodcock, right? And it's gorgeous, and it's so well done, and he is involved with a lot of NRCS programs, and he's taken advantage in a great way of a lot of tools. And, he's an ambassador for healthy forests. And so we did this woods walk, and I was only a couple months in at the time, and woods walks aren't on our typical, what do you do as a conservation organization? But, we wanted to do it. And I think we had 23 people show up, and Billy, the diversity of folks that came to this, you had diehard bird hunters, you had people in the forest industry, right? But you also have these, these older couples that have a back 40, and they think about managing, but they don't really know what to do, and they just want it to be as healthy for wildlife as possible. We had bird watchers come that were just excited to be there because, woodcock are, just an incredible species just to look at and be around. And so they're just fired up about how can we engage with providing a healthier space. And man, we walked this property, and Bruce, was able to talk about the property and the work he's done there. And Todd's kind of filling in and helping out, talk about the conservation aspect of it, and some of the science behind the forestry. And we've got foresters from the DEC, and we've got these landowners, and I think somebody from one of the forestry organizations, like professional development organizations in forestry, was there. And the conversations that we were having about, hey, here we are and here it is, right? And the best part was, and we're talking about seeing it and having that light bulb moment, is this forestry student from Paul Smith's brought a bird dog, and their dog is pointing grouse and pointing woodcock alongside this tour of people walking through the woods. And everybody's like, oh yeah, there it is. You know what I mean? And you talk about, I cut some trees the other day, and there are the deer, and it's just one of those things where once you start to see it, it's, it's like that light bulb comes on, and it's such a cool thing to like engage with that. And we're going to do more of that. We're going to do, as an organization and with chapters and with landowners and probably with agencies eventually, some more of these habitat days and wood walks, and maybe have folks come out and take a look at a timber sale, or have folks come out and take a look at what active management looks like and what it's doing at different times of the year. It's a great way to engage with what it is that we're up to, and it's a great way for people to learn, myself included, because I'm green, you know what I mean? I'm new to a lot of this. And it's just such a nice part to be able to just go out and be immersed in it for a day. Yeah.
It is. It's cool. And it's just a matter of making the time to go and participate in those things. And what an outstanding opportunity it really is, because you don't know what people are coming into that with their expectations and their desires, or what their walk of life. Are they somebody who's never even been in that environment, and this is like completely new to them? And to see that and experience it is just so cool. And that's something you've been involved in, Todd. Aside from Ruffed Grouse, you've been doing the Field to Fork program for several years now. I mean, what's your experience with that? Because I know you've had, what's it been, 3 years you've been part of that program now? And what's your experience been just bringing people into the outdoors with you and seeing it? These are all adults really that you're going out with, and this is all totally new to them. That's something too that you and we've talked a ton about that. Like, I'm super passionate about getting new people into the outdoors. And what's that experience been for you over the last few years doing that?
It's been absolutely amazing, Billy. When you look and you step back and you look at, our communities, there's so much in common. There's so many commonalities that we could work on. And that, like, bringing new people into the outdoor space through hunting and a relationship with their food, and providing a community that's warm and welcoming to them and an open door, has just been an incredible experience. This year we did a Field to Fork outside of Albany, and it was one of the best weekends I've ever spent in the woods. It was National Deer Association. It was the Nature Conservancy. It was Hunters of Color. It was Backcountry Hunters of Anglers, bringing people together, hearing their stories. We had like 8 new hunters, and, we came together on a Thursday or Friday night, and to see that community develop in such a short time, over meals, over some beers, over spending time in the woods and talking about what it takes to have deer on the ground, and walking through, the shooting range and the hunting ethics and stuff like that, seeing the smiles on the faces, the tears of happiness that they found a community. That's really exciting to me. Yep. And so I think we have so much in common. Like, you were talking about, I don't know where I was going to go with this, but I was just thinking, I was talking the other day to Trout Unlimited, for instance. And like, when you look at forests and everything that they can provide, and this habitat that we're talking about, and these old forests that are on the ground that we can go out and hike in, we can have all those things. Like, we need all those things. We need those old forests just as much as we need the young forests. And so if we do this correctly with the right partners, we can have these different pieces on the ground. And like, I was so impressed. Like, I was talking to Trout Unlimited. They were talking about riparian work that they're doing that's going to be good for trout. And then we started kind of connecting the dots, and that's good for woodcock, and that's good for rafting and angling and stuff like that. And it's like, dang, that's cool. Here we are, we've all got our own thing, but if we come together and look at the big picture, we can do this. We can work together. We can provide opportunities for habitat that's going to benefit everybody. We just need to be at the table.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of came up with Brian Gottfried talking about DU. He's new there. I was talking to Mike Edwards at the Deer Association a couple weeks ago. Similar conversation there, and I think that's one of the things, and this has always been something in the back of my mind, Todd, and I've said this to Mike, is that there's so many good organizations out there, and everybody, you donate your time and your money to one, but you're totally not aware of what the other's doing and the crossover between them. And I feel like that's something that we all should try to find a better way. And it's cool to hear that you're engaging with some of these other groups. That's one of the questions I have, is like, what other organizations are you guys engaging with? But I think that we have a problem in today's world where we all, like I've been a member of the Deer Association now only for 2 years, but I've hunted deer my whole life, but I'm not a member of the organization. But there's all these organizations out there. I'm members of 6 of them probably now, but it's like, I'm like every other week I'm getting a magazine. There's like all this stuff. And it's like, but what's our group approach to habitat and the landscapes that we have here in New York? Just look at what we have. We have incredible resources. I don't know if there's another state that really truly has what we have with the Great Lakes, the Finger Lakes, the Adirondacks, the Catskills, all the diversity we have. We have ag land. We have everything here. But all of these organizations, we're all like micro focused on our little things, and we're not paying any attention to all the other stuff. But yet a lot of our projects could be, let's go do a habitat day with 3 of these organizations working together, not just the one. I think that's something, talking with you guys from your end of it, like I think that's something that we really should do, because we could easily get, 3 or 4 people from Ruffed Grouse. We could get 3 or 4 people from the Deer Association, 3 or 4 people from BHA, and we're all at the same habitat day working at Hightor planting trees, like power in numbers. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you guys are into this stuff too? No idea. Like we're all working together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And partners come out of the woodwork. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how great a partner NWTF has been for RGS in the Northeast. We're working on some projects in Massachusetts with the agencies, with a land trust. Big shout out to Mount Grace Land Trust. NWTF, Matt DeBona, is an amazing partner. Like there's so many commonalities around the habitat work that we're doing there that spread over into the Northeast. And, one thing I learned, I was this is just like Vermont, but it's so appropriate to what you were just saying. The Green Mountain National Forest is 400,000 acres. It's like one of our own, like our only federal forests in the Northeast, aside from the White. The Finger Lakes, by the way, are part of the Green Mountain National Forest. So they had a stakeholder conservation day. 30 different organizations showed up to support them and say, hey, we're all on the board for all these things that you're talking about with your management approach, with having healthy ecosystems and resilient stuff, and like all the forestry work that the Green Mountain National Forest wants to do. 30 of them, 30 organizations show up. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, you're leveraging all of that impact 30x. That's a way to get stuff done.
Agreed.
I think you'll see more of that too. Those conversations have been happening on the back end. I've had a couple of great conversations with Mike Edwards from NDA, getting my start here in conservation fundraising and nonprofits in New York State. He was one of the first people I called just to pick his brain about different things and the way things work and the way they don't work. And, I'm a NDA member and he's an RGS member, and, we share common goals. We share common ideals for habitat work, and we share members. You know what I mean? You'd be hard pressed to find, you think of yourself, Billy, you're hard pressed to go to the DU banquet and not talk to somebody that you're like, I met you at the Turkey Federation banquet.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? I'm talking to people all the time that I met when I was volunteering with BHA and we put on that public grouse film in Syracuse. That's where I met you for the first time in person.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time, and it's like we're all in that space together. And I think you will see more habitat focused and also just fun and fundraising focused partnerships between those organizations. And, like Todd said, when it comes time to get things done policy wise or to kind of combine efforts on getting conservation work done, that just is a shoe in. You know what I mean? It makes so much sense to work together. And I'm glad to know that there's so many great folks in New York and the Northeast. I mean, all the RDs that I've talked to that run these chapters up here have just been awesome.
So speaking to the events, I know that the last 2 years have been a freaking disaster for events, but what does RGS typically do? Do you guys have kind of that standard? Have you guys in the past had that banquet scene where your chapters would do banquets and that?
Yeah, I think in the past, there's, the banquet has always been the big thing. A lot of sporting clays shoots for chapters in Ruffed Grouse Society chapters throughout the years. And, you know, the last couple years has been insane, and I've only been here for 7 months of it. And you know, I think there's just as many positives to it as there are negatives, and there are obviously negatives, but some of the positives are just, you know, creative license, you know, given to me and my chapters and our members to kind of do new things, try new things like that habitat walk, try new things like we're putting together almost like a virtual banquet, and people are sick of virtual things, but it won't be like your typical Zoom room that we've been doing for the last 3 years, you know, but just different opportunities coming out of COVID and bursting out of COVID. Some of those classic banquets are absolutely still going to take place, and a lot of them, you know, we've got chapters that the banquet, you know, I've heard you talk about the Limb Hangers Crossroads banquet on here for a couple years now, and you know that is such a fun thing every year that why get rid of it, you know? So there's chapters that are absolutely going to continue having successful banquets, but there's also chapters that are, you know, they're coming out with cool ways to get together, cool ways to raise funds, you know, those woods walks and, you know, putting new spins on things. I've got a chapter right now that, you know, they have a sporting clay shoot every year, and it gets a fair amount of grouse hunters, and it gets a lot of sporting clay shooters that come out and they still pay their fee and they still raise money for grouse. But these guys want to do like a sporting clay shoot where you wear your grouse hunting gear, and you have to, you know, on the honor system that you're going to use your grouse gun, you know, you have to shoot your grouse gun, you have to, and it's just, you know, that creative license to be able to shake things up.
Yeah.
Has been a fun part of me getting started here with Ruffed Grouse Society, you know? So as far as that old banquet model, it's successful. Banquets are fantastic. They're a great way to get folks together every year. They're a great engagement opportunity. They raise a ton of money for habitat. And it's rocking. I love it. Looking forward to the next one, but that creative, you know, space to be able to let's move and shake a little bit here and let's see what we can do has been fun, and is going to continue to be fun.
Yeah. And Sean Burdick from, you know, he's big with DU. Sean's got a million irons in the fire. He's also, so I met him through BHA as well. So like, that's where a lot of these, you know, commonalities we all met, but we're all also involved with other organizations and passionate about other things. And Sean, so they started their organization right at the beginning of 2020, and they never had an opportunity to do anything. So their first event was last spring, and they did that archery shoot in May. And then, so they did an archery shoot in the morning, and it was at the Wellsville Rod and Gun Club. Had a great archery shoot. You could walk a 3D course or just do like stationary targets. They did like a long range deal, and they had some great prizes. And then they did like, basically they did the live auction raffles and things like that, like a banquet style in the afternoon. Unbelievable time. And I was talking with him and spitting ideas. I'm like, because he wants to make it even bigger this year. And I said, one of the things you should do is let's talk with these other organizations and see if they want to come down. And like I brought a table and a pop-up tent, and I had my podcast stuff. I recorded a bunch of live stuff there, meeting people. It was cool. But why not have RGS have a tent there, whether there's a local chapter or you come down and, you know, you and Todd or whatever, whoever comes down, like you're there to talk about your organization. And it's free. Everybody's there. You're all there for the same reasons. What a great opportunity, you know? So I think stuff like that, I think it is, you know, Mike has said it too, talking with him. It's like we got to, whether it's like golf events or, you know, something, like spice it up so that it's different. Because, yeah, the banquets are great, but you can only have so many pictures on the wall of, you know, turkeys strutting in the spring. I asked my dad. I think my mom is a freaking saint because he's got like half of NWTF's art gallery over the last 20 years in his damn house. But, you know, you have to mix it up. You can't stay with the same flavor all the time. So, yeah, and that's fun stuff. So, good answer there. We're running on about an hour and a half, so kind of start winding her down. But I do want to hit you guys on one thing that Mike had brought it up to me last week when we were talking. Mike Edwards talking about the American Grassland Act. Are you guys aware of that? I would assume that's something that's fairly in tune with the grouse world, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, the Grassland Act, huge opportunity there. When you look at the big picture, you know, Pheasants Forever, for instance, would be all over that. Mm-hmm. And the impact that can have on habitat across so much of the country. I mean, you look at the Midwest and the impact that grasslands and the threat that we've faced with grasslands over the last few decades. A lot of the threats to grasslands, what's really interesting is when you start looking at like how conservation works and like where threats come from and everything. There's so many commonalities. Like what we're dealing with grasslands, has its own unique issues, but it's not that different. Like when you like start looking at like digging into root causes around like, okay, what's happening with this habitat? What's the indirect contributions like that's happening behind the scenes, and like how are all these systems working? So we've been really tied into the forestry kind of stuff that like is coming down around policy. We've been really tuned into that. But like in terms of like supporting grassland, the Grassland Act, our partners work on that stuff. We support groups like TRCP. We're involved in that whole coalition, so we'll tee up with that and support that, whether that's like our driving concern for forest habitat or not.
Yeah, so I would encourage people to look into it. It was like in passing, Mike had made a comment to me about that. NDA is supporting it. So I briefly looked at it yesterday, but it is, it's just like anything. There's a lot to it, so I need to read more up on it about what exactly it is. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can look at it and you can see the value of trying to regenerate some of these areas that have been degraded over the years. Landscapes change, the environment changes, and you got to try to restore some of that and try to either bring it back or maintain it. And I think some of that encourages farmers putting stuff back into reproductive property and stop farming it. All that has to do with that, the CRP programs and that. So it's interesting. I guess I just want to bring it up to see if it was on your guys' radar or not. Obviously not necessarily in the exact realm of what you guys are doing, but good to hear that you're aware of it. And if people are interested in what that's all about, it sounds like that's something that's legislation that, just like some of the stuff we saw in the past 4 years that was passed, there was different, what was it? The freshwater, what the hell was that? The big one what was that?
Land and Water Conservation Fund. That was a big deal. Yep. So that was a huge thing when it got passed, and they're saying that this could be just as big and just as important as that. So there are so many pieces out there right now in terms of potential funding between the Grasslands Act, between Recovering America's Wildlife Act, the infrastructure bill. Like we are in this really exciting time right now where if some of that funding actually lands, billions of dollars in habitat work that's going to unleash here out of this stuff. So it really is important. And, it's something that, when we're talking about that much at stake, like being able to work with partners, whether it's in your wheelhouse or not, but coming around with common support for the bigger picture of having programs well funded is really key.
Yeah, because a lot of these things without funding, they can't happen. That's the reality of it, is that there's only so many standard tax dollars that can go towards these agencies to do these things. You alluded to it with the Young Forest Initiative. If there isn't the flow of funds to get some of this stuff done, it's not going to go anywhere. So, that's it's very interesting the way when you dig into it, the way a lot of these things work is that if there isn't federal money there to do it, it's probably not going to get done, and that can be for things that you support and things that you don't support. That goes both ways. A lot of these projects go with the funding.
And to give the hunters and anglers a shout out here around funding, our mutual friend, Mike Palopoulos, had posted a Facebook post today around Pittman-Robertson allocation and funding. And I think this year's allocation is over $1 billion. So those are excise taxes that hunters and anglers have contributed directly. That goes back into hunter ed, that goes back into wildlife management areas. I think I saw that New York State's allocation was something like 30 million. And so those are huge pots of money coming right out of the hunting and angling community. So kudos to that. And then, those funds can also be leveraged when conservation partners match that or come to the state there's like a 3x match on that. So if conservation partner brings 10 grand to do habitat work, they can leverage 30 grand of Pittman Robertson. So really big funding pool. Just want to thank all the hunters and anglers out there that do their thing.
Yeah, and that's another, we haven't talked about that in here in a long time, but Pittman Robertson, a lot of people have no clue what that is, but we are, as hunters and anglers, we are funding a lot of these conservation initiatives, and that was something, a law that changed last spring was that they were able to use Pittman Robertson funds to market hunting. And that was a change. So I've seen more commercials on TV and on YouTube and stuff that are more hunting-based commercials. So that's something, too, that's important. I think, gaining hunters and whether it's you're actually, gaining new hunters or you're just educating people on what hunting's all about. That's the other piece that's vitally important. Nobody really has a problem with fishing. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, fishing is great, but you start talking about hunting and, people get all freaked out because they think we're out there, freaking murdering and slaughtering animals and leaving them there to rot. It's just, that's not the picture, So
yep.
Mostly Todd and I are just missing everything anyway. So
yeah.
Yeah, well,
a lot of birds survive our hunt. For sure.
Yeah, well, you're doing
we're doing our part on conservation.
Yeah, a lot of timber management happening with your bird shot, huh?
That's right, buddy.
Yeah,
that's right.
Trimming trees.
No doubt.
Is there anything we didn't cover? Anything you guys want to talk about before we kind of wrap this thing up?
I'd love to just quickly, call out for folks if they're interested to look us up. The website's very easy to find. Social media sites are really easy to find. Consider joining a membership. Todd and I will put it to good use, and for folks to reach out anytime. I'm always telling folks, we're accessible. You know what I mean? So if folks want to talk habitat in their backyard or not, reach out. And, if at the very least, we have a newsletter called The Bellwether that you can sign up for on our website. And that'll give you updates from what RGS is up to around the country, updates from Todd and I and our counterpart here in the Northeast Tripway. It's just keep an eye out for us. And as far as, New York, I know most of the podcast folks here, Billy, I think, are in New York, but New York and the entire Northeast, keep an eye out because events are starting to ramp back up again, be it virtual or in person, something old or something new. We're getting together and having a great time and raising money for healthy habitat and wildlife. So.
Yeah, that's well said, Nate. And it's such a pleasure working with you. Nate and I have been working together since last summer. It's an amazing ride. Looking forward to big things. Yeah, folks can find us at ruffedgrousesociety.org. So if you're online, you can get a membership on our website, ruffedgrousesociety.org. I think they're around like $35, right? And you get covers magazines quarterly. Get signed up for these chapter events. We've got, how many chapters do we have in New York, Nate? We've got probably maybe not quite a half a dozen, but
just shy of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're in Western New York or the Finger Lakes, there's chapters up in the North Country. People that care very passionately about dogs and birds, and it's been really fun. Like one thing that's been cool working with RGS members is that we're in our 60th year right now. And some of these members have been supporting RGS for, 30, 35, 40 years. So a lot of knowledge there and a big opportunity to connect with people that want to share that passion with other people as well.
I love it.
Absolutely. Billy, I got to tell you too, real quick, I saved this for you. Our president and CEO, Ben Jones, said pert near in a staff meeting the other day. And I just had to, I paused and I said, don't think we're not out here.
I'll have to send him a feeding him sticker. I'll have to start getting him to stay. He probably says feeding him all the time. He doesn't even know it.
I'm certain of it.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Oh, that warms my heart. And you're still pretty active with your podcast, Todd?
So I've been in grad school for the last year and a half.
I thought you'd been a little quiet on that. I hadn't seen much new stuff out from you.
Yeah. So I will be done with grad school in July. And so I've really just had to kind of tone down podcasting, focus on grad school, focus on work. I love podcasting so much that when I get done with grad school, I'd love to pick some of it back up again. The conversations are amazing. You know, that podcast that you and I did back in Saratoga Park was one of the most popular podcast episodes. I did, you know, probably 140 episodes, or I think it was more like 120 with East to West.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, each one is really unique and special. And that one did really good on reception and downloads. And it was right up there, like in the top, I don't know, I can't remember, top 5 or 10. So really pumped me up to have that conversation. And
that was fun.
Really great to see how long, like, you guys are crushing it here in the Pertinier community. So it's awesome to just have us on. Thanks for letting us be a part of it. And it's always fun.
Yeah, man, it is. It's good to catch up, and we'll have to get back on again. Something I was just thinking about it as we were getting ready to wrap here, Todd. It'd be fun to get you and maybe like Matt Ross or, you know, somebody on to talk about that Field to Fork program, and maybe a couple of the hunters from this year to hear their stories and their perspectives. I think that'd be really cool, because I've heard some of those. You know, like I think Wired to Hunt, he's done that. You know, kind of the follow up with some of that, but I always love hearing, you know, people's perspectives, like first time out and first experience. Like when we go and we do our camps, and the last few years we've had new guys come with us to Pennsylvania, and like they just like freaking soak it up. They're like, this is just the greatest thing. So what you guys did, I would love to follow up and maybe talk on that and get some perspective there.
Yeah, count me in. Matt Ross is an awesome dude, and those Field to Fork events are amazing. And that weekend, no cliche, it's like one of the best weekends I've ever had in the woods with people. It was amazing. So
awesome.
We can line that up. I'm all in.
Cool beans. All right. Thank you both. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you don't follow these guys, check them out. They're both on social media, and check out the Ruffed Grouse Society. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Uncle Todd and Nate. Till next time.
Appreciate you, buddy.
Gabe fading them.
That's right.
See ya.